everybody, welcome. Tesla stock at $200 per share, almost on the dot. It was up a couple percent in the morning, but then the stock price declined a little bit. Overall markets, Dow Jones down 0.3%, NASDAQ up 0.4% on back of Apple, Google, and Meta. S&P 500 flat. Not much change today except for durable orders for January came in negative 6.1%. Durable goods ex transportation for January was also negative 0.3%. So for now, January data looks bad. Durable orders are down. Inflation came in higher than expected. So we're going to see in the coming weeks if January was, seasonality adjustment issues or if that's a trend. FHFA housing price index for December was up 0.1%. That's down from 0.4% in November. And we also got one of the first readings for February today. Consumer confidence index came in at 106.7. That's very materially lower than the expected 114.6. And also lower than the January reading of 110.9. So it was 106, expected 115, prior 111. Consumer confidence. Crude oil at $79 per barrel. Natural gas 180. Trying to see if there's any material changes in any specific stocks. Let's look at headlines. Swedish property giants write down billings as prices crash. Interesting. There's also reports. I haven't dug into it just yet, but Altos Research published a video yesterday on US housing titled More Sellers, Fewer Buyers, and an Increase in Price Cuts. So housing in US appears to be weakening as well. Let's see who's in the room. Wes is here if he wants to come up and talk. Oh, Utes is here if he wants to talk a little macro. We didn't get a chance last weekend to chat. Maybe About Tesla can come up and give us an update on software rollouts. Oh, wow, we have a lot of people in the live chat right now. Interesting. Even though I stopped publishing the link because X shadow banned me for publishing too many YouTube links. Wow. Yeah, folks in the live chat, please like the video if you could, please. All right. Soon I'm going to get StreamYard. I'm getting a laptop tomorrow, I think, or Thursday. Get a laptop on Thursday, MacBook Pro, so that should ease up a little bit of the editing work. And I'm going to get StreamYard for YouTube live chat. We're gonna get some video on live chat as well. Right now it's only text. One major news item that came out today, Elon retweeted it as well. Apple stopping car project. Apple stopping car project. Breaking, Apple winding down electric car plans ending decade-long foray, per Bloomberg. Some Apple car employees to be cut, many will shift to AI. If the folks in YouTube Live have a question, you may type it into the chat and we can talk about it. Let's see if this Bloomberg article on Apple Car has any more details. You would think a news like this would help Tesla a little bit, the stock, but Apple is abandoning its years-old effort to build an electric car. The almost 2,000 Apple employees tasked with developing an electric car, a secretive project sometimes called Titan, found out the project was being discontinued in an internal memo from Chief Operating Officer Jeff Williams and Vice President of Technology Kevin Lynch on Tuesday, Bloomberg reported, citing unnamed sources. The decision to stop the project will bring layoffs, according to Bloomberg, though it's not clear how many employees will be impacted. News of the delay comes just a month after Apple delayed the release date of the car by 2 years, pushing it from 2026, an already delayed date, to 2028. Apple did not immediately respond to Forbes' request for comment. Apple had reportedly been developing its own autonomous car since 2014, seeking to enter the complex and already competitive auto industry, though details of the project have remained scarce. In 2017, Apple's CEO Tim Cook said he saw autonomous driving as the mother of all AI projects, but didn't discuss Apple's own development. The company once reportedly considered building a vehicle without pedals or a steering wheel, but Apple scaled back its plans, shifting last month from a Level 4 autonomous driving system that can steer itself in some cases to a Level 2 Plus that would allow for lane centering and adaptive cruise control. Though it would launch Apple into a new category and allow it to compete with other companies like Tesla and major automakers, there were reports the project was costing hundreds of millions of dollars annually. $100,000. That's how much Apple had envisioned selling its electric car for, Bloomberg reported, though executives were reportedly concerned about potential profit margins. Wow. So even at $100,000, Apple was concerned about margins, but Tesla is trying to do it at $25,000. So they must have seen something, maybe V12. That's possible. Maybe FSD V12 led Apple executives to say, you know what, Tesla's going to end up doing it for much cheaper than what we're trying to do. So there's no point in pursuing this. About Tesla, how are you?
Yeah, man, how are you doing?
Good. What's the latest on software updates? Where do we stand on V12 rollout?
Well, everything is paused. There have been no new cars targeted in the past week. So it's been pretty much almost a week since they paused the update. It is important to understand that the actual installations always trail the rollout. So once they target the car, then it may take days for someone to install it, to be connected to Wi-Fi and so forth. So there have been some installations going on throughout the week, but no new cars targeted according to TeslaFi. So just the last big push was more than a week ago now. No other big rollouts as far as other versions. The biggest rollout is 2024.2.7, which is basically pushing out 2.6. But it seems to be going primarily to cars that don't have FSD. So there might be some cars with FSD on it, but it looks like majority of FSD cars are still being kept on the 2023.44.30 branch, which makes sense if they don't plan to move the FSD, merge it with the latest user interface updates, it would make sense to keep it on that old branch so that they can switch to FSD whenever they're ready without making too many changes to the FSD branch. So that's basically that's where we stand. There's not much going on.
Why do you think FSD V12 rollout came to a grinding halt?
I think they found some issues. There have been some issues reported by YouTubers, so they just didn't feel it's good enough to continue the rollout. So they had enough issues to work on. So they're probably getting ready for the new update. That would be my hope.
How many cars do you estimate has FSD 12 today?
A few thousand.
A few thousand. And is it fair to assume that the cars that are on Tesla Fi are, more technologically forgiving and advanced customers?
Yes, I think so. But it's really hard to estimate, how representative that is. To be honest, first of all, most of V12 cars are in California right now, so it's not hasn't been pushed to too many other states. There is also, there might be some fluctuations by different versions or different models. Like, for example, hardware 3 has been predominant for the rollout, but then again, they're not equally represented. So, to be honest, I don't have the good idea about, how exactly, what would be the exact statistical representation of the entire fleet. But it's safe to say it's somewhere, around a few thousand total. I think that's accurate enough.
So you said most people who have V12 are in California, right? Is it like 80, 90%? Have you seen any V12 outside of California?
Last time I checked, I think they were like on the Tesla Fi, they were out of 60. Last time I checked, it was like 66 or 63 or something like that. Total cars represented in their database, and only 3 of them were outside California. And it was Nevada, I think 2 cars in Nevada, and 1 car in somewhere also. Don't remember exactly, I can check. But basically, majority were, huge majority were in California or near California at least.
So what does that tell you? Why is Tesla prioritizing California? Is it because the software is just better in California and they're not confident in other states right now?
Well, they start with the home ground, I guess, and something that the familiar territory, so I just want to nail that part. It's easier for them to control and do that, and then they can handle more, less familiar territory. So that would, that would make sense, I guess.
All right. When do you think FSD 12 is going to...
it's the rollout is so small, like it's less, it's 0.3% of the fleet. So it's less than 0.5%. So it's just, they can focus on any territory. So it just makes sense to focus on whatever they're more familiar and easier for them to control and reproduce. But when they go for a wider rollout, then it will obviously expand the boundaries. Sorry, what was your question?
When do you think 12 is going to go wide, if you had to guess? If you're a betting man. People in live chat are making me laugh right now.
Oh, I'm not a betting man. I only had 2 bets, coffee bets, and I think I have both won because I was pretty sure. But anyway, my best guess is it should be, maybe even this coming weekend. It depends on how difficult the problems that they found are. I mean, is it an easy fix, or is it something that they have to go back and change their training set completely, find new videos and stuff like that. So it's just depending on what the solution is to those issues that they're seeing. It can be as easy as just putting an additional manually hardened logic to prevent certain things, or it could be something major where they have to change their training set and look for more edge cases or something like that. So depending on how much work they need to do, it can be a week or two, or it could be a month or two. I don't think it will take that long though.
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to fix some audio issues. And how about now? But this is going to change soon. We're going to do StreamYard, pipe in the audio. Okay, sorry. Machine is in live chat, but he's not here. That's weird. Weirdo. Or maybe he is here under different accounts. Maybe the same.
I'll have to step out soon. So just what do you think about this Apple information?
Well, I mean, look at the market reaction, right? Like zero market reaction. That's because I don't think anyone believed at this point that Apple would come and catch Tesla by any stretch of imagination. So, wow, Machine says he deleted X from his phone for a while. What do you make of that?
I don't know. He has a new account now.
Maybe we should put them into Tesla Killer Cemetery. What do you think? Apple.
No, I don't think so.
No? Did you try their Apple Vision yet? Vision Pro?
No. I don't know. I still need to find any reasonable application for it, to be honest. You know what? I tried that the Microsoft what was that called? That device that they had years ago, and at that time I couldn't see. Okay, I can see the engineers or like graphics designers or architects might be using this for some sort of applications, but as a mass product, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Apple released it with the idea to make a consumer product at this point. I think they were just trying. I think they probably realized that most people will return it after trying it. But I think the reason they did this anyway was twofold. One is they just wanted to make a splash to show that they're in the game and this is what they're working on, and have a lot of advertisement, have a lot of YouTubers post their videos and stuff. The second purpose would be to involve engineers and developers and application field specialists that look at this so that they can maybe come up with some ideas and applications for it. And when Microsoft released their this I forgot what this was called, device, they didn't release it as a consumer product. They specifically released it just for developers only, pretty much. I think Apple is doing the same thing, but they just didn't mention it. So they thought, okay, well, developers will take it and will use it, but others will just play with it and return.
We have almost 100 people in live chat. What is going on in live chat today? It's hot over there. There's more people in live chat than on X Spaces. How is that even possible? Anyway. Is Tesla 100% of your position? About Tesla?
Not 100, but
do you have Nvidia?
I think it's more than 95% now.
Oh wow, more than 95. Do you have any?
It used to be less than that, but it grew so much that to figure it out.
Right. Do you have any Nvidia?
No, I'm not planning on getting Nvidia because it's too risky and too unpredictable for me. I only want to invest in things that I understand and see the trajectory. For Nvidia, it's just, I don't know, it may go up and can go way up, or it may go way down. So who knows? I'm not comfortable investing in such unpredictable things.
Well, Gene Monster doesn't think so. Gene Monster thinks Nvidia stock will continue to go up. But in yesterday's space, we talked about the customer concentration, and I'm editing yesterday's space right now. And I was just shocked to see, like, I knew they had some concentration, but I think half of their revenue is like 3-4 companies. Top 4 companies comprise about half of Nvidia's data center revenue. Isn't that wild? And every single one of those companies is trying to replace Nvidia. And they're capable companies, you know, they have software, like they're not for GM kind of companies. These are Microsoft, Amazon. Interesting.
Well, the question is whether they will be able to replace them and how quickly that will happen. Maybe they're just doing that to control the prices from Nvidia, not so much to replace them, but just to make sure that they're not raising the prices.
Well, the impact on Nvidia investors is the same, right? If Nvidia can't continue to charge these high prices, margins, because others are even trying or threatening to bring what Nvidia does in-house, then it's the same impact on the stock price.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I listened into the conversation yesterday, and I think some pretty good points were mentioned. It's really hard to say which direction it will go because there are so many unpredictable things. It may be there will be completely different solutions found, or maybe different computer architecture will be required to progress further. So that's a very quickly evolving area. So it's just hard to say where it will be a couple of years from now. I mean, it's safe to say that they will probably be doing okay for another year or maybe 2 years. Who knows?
You mean the stock or the top line or the bottom line for Nvidia is going to be doing okay for the next year?
I mean, their production will continue growing, and the stock will not be. The stock price will not be a reflection of how well they're doing at the moment, but will be a reflection of their trajectory to the future, right? So they may still be doing very well for the next couple of years, but if the trajectory stops growing or starts going down or something, that will be a big signal to sell or at least to shift priorities and things like that. So So that's what.
Are you
makes it
looking
so
to short
unpredictable.
Nvidia?
No, I'm not shorting anyone. Again, I'm not gambling on this. I just try to find things that I understand and invest for a long time. And so far, Tesla has been doing pretty well for that.
What do you do professionally? What's your professional career in? What topics can I dig into with you?
It's mostly computer software, but not artificial intelligence specifically.
So what languages do you
More
use?
application software.
What programming languages do you use?
Well, mostly C#. I've been using C++, Visual Basic, and many other different languages, starting with, like Fortran or Pascal back in many years back.
And when you're doing software programming, for which chips have you programmed in the past, in recent years, let's say?
Chips, well, primarily Intel. There was, but most of the more recent architectures, they were pretty high level, so it wouldn't be a very chip specific. But Intel would be the main platform I've been working on for years.
Do you think Intel has a chance at all in entering the AI game at all?
Oh, by Intel, I don't mean Intel, just the company. I mean AMD would be the same architecture. But as far, I don't know. I mean, it's really strange to see them struggling so much. I mean, it's not the first. They've been struggling for years. It seems from the technology side. I mean, there is a reason why everyone is moving away from Intel. Even Microsoft, with their Surface, started, doing. The reason is just because they are lagging behind. So they're not They're not evolving quickly enough, and that's really frustrating to see. I mean, they got a potential. I don't know what's going on. I haven't been following them as a company too much, to be honest. But,
Intel today is a $180 billion company, and the stock hasn't done anything since the tech bubble in 1999. They went down a lot in 2021 and 2022. The stock more than halved in those 2 years. Since then, it's recovered a little bit. But in the last 20 years, 25 years, the stock hasn't done anything. Isn't that crazy? Their dividend yield, even their dividend yield, like for example, Ford, GM, they also haven't done much in the last 2 decades, but they at least pay out some dividends. Whereas Intel dividend yield is only 1%. 1%. And no stock price appreciation. Can you imagine? In 1999, when people thought of Intel, they thought of cutting edge innovation. Kind of the way they think about Nvidia today. Can you imagine if Nvidia stock didn't do anything for the next 2 to 3 decades after all this? I guess Intel proves that it's possible, that could be a possible outcome for Nvidia, but who knows?
yeah, I think they probably their success, just the fact that they were in most computers in the world, just basically they became so they stagnant, I guess, and they just they were just doing what they've been doing, then instead of trying to innovate and move into new areas and so forth. Nvidia, on the other hand, they got lucky to some extent, but also it's their effort to innovate that actually brought this success to them. They got lucky because, I mean, they started just as a video card, manufacturer, and then they became popular. They made their way to most computers with the video graphics, and then gaming came, and they suddenly, realized that they can charge much more money for their video cards than they used to. Then obviously the Bitcoin came about, and they realized that they can help with their graphics cards and so forth. And now they have this new wave that's suddenly AI found that, the AI developers found that it's easier to use the graphics cards than the usual regular CPUs to do this. So to some extent, it's luck, but it's also, we need to give them credit because they've been innovating and progressing very actively, and that's probably the result of all that.
So you said something interesting just a second. You said something interesting just a second ago. You said Nvidia got lucky, and I've heard, if you, is it Jensen being a visionary that got Nvidia where it is today? I mean, the guy founded the company, right, 3 decades ago, in the early 90s. He founded the company, and he's been able to ride the waves of multiple waves. And Nvidia today is a $2 trillion company. There is no example in history of a founder building from scratch to carrying a company to $2 trillion. Okay. But there are people who say Nvidia / Jensen got lucky. And there are people who look at Jensen and say, this guy is just an incredible entrepreneur, founder, etc. And the answer to that question is very important because, should we assume that these revenue growth margin figures are going to continue because as long as Jensen is at the head of Nvidia, or is this the last wave they're going to ride before their margins crash? So why do you say they got lucky? Like, for example, I was watching a couple of interviews last night of him, and Andrew Sorkin's interview of Jensen. He brought up, this was in November, I believe, he brought up that Jensen delivered the first AI computer to OpenAI and Elon years ago. So I don't understand how people say Jensen got lucky when he literally built the first AI computer.
Well, I think it's both luck and also the genius of the company and leaders. But to which percentage, to which extent that was important, hard to say. What is important about graphics cards and why they are applicable here is just because the graphics cards do essentially very simple math, but parallel processing. So you have a lot of flats for graphics. You have a lot of pixels, for example, on your picture, and now you need to adjust the brightness of them. So you basically apply the same formula to many, many of those pixels. So that's why for graphics, you don't need powerful processors with floating math or anything like that. You just need very simple addition, subtraction, and so forth. But you need to be able to do it quickly to many, many, many of them. So that's what differentiates the graphics cards, like what Nvidia traditionally has been working on, from normal CPUs that, let's say, Intel is working on, right? So, and the luck, in my opinion, was that this kind of math was the solution for the AI. So, and we didn't know that. Until recently, it wasn't clear which way the AI would be achieved. Maybe if you needed some logic, like a lot of if-then statements just manually coded logic and take it to extreme, then the graphics cards would not help you with that. So it just became clear recently that you can use that parallel processing, very simple math applied to huge arrays of data. You can apply that technique and achieve good results in the artificial intelligence. So I think that part was luck. I don't think that was clear from the beginning that this would happen. But to realize that luck and take advantage of it, that obviously takes a good businessman.
David Katz, what do you think?
Thank you. And the speaker is very, very correct. I think it's a combination. They say hard work makes good luck. So if you've had the groundwork and you can seize opportunities when the door opens, maybe the door opening is a combination of luck, but you are ready to go. You look at Tesla and SpaceX. They promised NASA they would build 3 rockets and they would land with reusable parts, and the first 3 failed. And they were about to be out of luck. And they had enough parts in the factory to make a 4th one without having to, they were out of money too, without having to spend money. And that 4th one worked. And so luck, of course, in space is probably a bigger factor, but timing of everything you produce. I mean, if Tesla had to produce the Model 3 in 2018 with the interest rates we have now, it would have been much harder. So timing and luck are always an element, and you make your luck with hard work.
Why couldn't other GPU companies make their luck?
Some of it goes back to the leader, right?
Yeah, I don't think you get to 2 trillion with luck. I don't think luck is a primary factor here. But
I don't think you start with luck. Maybe where you were born.
I mean, he's in his interview with Andrew Sorkin, he said that the company realized early on that AI was going to change computing altogether and everything about computing. So about Tesla talked about matrix multiplication, parallel processing, etc. And it sounds like Nvidia took early steps to redirect the company to be, for the second age of AI, or the new age of AI.
You know much more about this than I do, but obviously people who can see the future and are willing to change, they always do better. I mean, there were companies in China during COVID who were making appliances, who pivoted to just making masks, like overnight, because they saw what was needed. And having that, ability to take those risks.
Yeah. It was an interesting interview. I recommend people to watch it if they haven't already. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. David Katz, do you have a position in Nvidia, or long or short, or options, or?
I wish I did. I do not. I went into real estate after 2008, and it's been good to me. I could go touch it and feel it, and I can't take it to the casino.
What area of the country is your real estate concentrated?
Oh, Pacific Northwest, where I live. I think you should have real estate where you live.
Are you in construction or long-term buy and hold type of, like a landlord?
Yeah, I'm a landlord. Commercial real estate.
Commercial real estate.
Commercial, small buildings, or just a few rental houses. I'm not a huge landowner.
There's a lot going on right now on commercial real estate. Lots of headlines, lots of alarm bells, people are ringing.
Sure.
Does that concern you at all?
No, these are 6,000 square foot buildings with 3 tenants, Main Street. kind of operators who have just a great record and a great. I've been lucky with my tenants, so we're a very small scale. Those are high rises that are going bankrupt, and that's a different market.
Do you see a knock-on effect on your segment at all?
What kind of effect?
Like a knock-on effect. Like, if the larger buildings go bankrupt, doesn't that reduce demand for smaller buildings?
Those are mostly office spaces, and I have ours are retail, some small warehouse. Like I call Main Street is like small businesses that need $2,000 to $4,000 square feet of space. I mean, it really is a different market.
People in live chat are wondering, David Katz, what kind of dog do you have on your profile picture?
That is English Springer Spaniel. His name is Colonel Pembroke. I didn't name him. Very good bird hunting dogs. I'm not a bird hunter, but most hunting dogs have to be intelligent, so they're just probably the 14th of breeds in intelligence, and very loyal, and just a great little pet, about mid-size.
All right, thank you. Yeah, this is interesting. We have record numbers in live chat right now, triple digits. More people in live chat than X. That's the first in X space history. Michael Hupka in replies says, Apple must have inside information about Tesla. Apple, for those of you who just joined, canceled their car project called Titan, laying some of the 2,000 engineers off. Some of them will be transferred into other AI functions within Apple. And we also speculated earlier that maybe they saw something with V12 that led them to believe that, Tesla is just too far ahead to beat. I'm going to start a YouTube membership service and maybe do these live chats members only so that Joe can't spam it the way he is right now. Oh, Meta is here today. Let's see if he wants to come up. David Katz, do you follow any, I guess you're in real estate, commercial, retail. Do you follow any macro? Actually, let's get out of that. Let's continue with Nvidia. Meta, welcome. How are you? Meta?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just popping in for like 10 minutes.
Okay, good. Yesterday's space, I went through the 10K of Nvidia just real quick, went to the customer concentration. Did you know that one customer comprises 20% of their revenues?
What customer? Is it Microsoft or Amazon?
Customer A. I'm guessing it's Microsoft.
Probably, yeah. I was going to go, it's probably Microsoft, yeah. Customer A.
Yeah, customer A.
What's their other big customers after that?
If Amazon labeled as customer A would be too easy. They're probably doing reverse psychology.
They wouldn't call it customer M, but I guess, who's their next biggest customer? Is it like a 1% or is it another like 5 or 10%?
It doesn't say.
No, they just had to like explain the risks of that one customer.
I think you have to disclose it if it's more than 10% or something.
Okay, so then that means the next biggest customer must be less than 10%.
Also, the other thing, yeah, probably. And then the other thing that it says is in previous 2 fiscal years, they didn't have that kind of concentration from that one customer. So somebody who started buying more chips this year versus the last 2 years. I mean, Microsoft is growing faster than AWS, right?
But that's because they're playing catch up.
Yeah, I don't know. If you were a betting man, would you say Microsoft or Amazon?
Microsoft.
Why? They're playing catch up.
That's why they're buying all the chips, because Amazon already has enough.
Good point. You got the right answer. I was just testing you.
Did they say when they started buying?
No, it
When that
doesn't
customer
say.
became their customer?
No, it just says the what percent of the revenues. That's all it says.
But theoretically, you could go to their old 10Ks and figure that out, right?
I think the old 10Ks. I mean, I could, but it sounds like they didn't have that kind of disclosure in the older 10K. I'll check again later. But anyway, the point really is that Microsoft is, they already developed their own chip and they're testing it now, right? And they started offering to customers already.
Yes.
Yeah. And I watched an Nvidia Jensen interview with Andrew Sorkin from November, the same interview or the same platform where Elon said GFY to Disney CEO. In that same event, Jensen talked about talked about the balance between customers and competitors. Let me ask you something. If Microsoft could replace Nvidia, like if they came out with a chip that's actually just as good as H100 or H200 and at 1/10 the price, and they had unlimited supply of their own chip, would they buy any chips from Nvidia?
No.
Exactly. Exactly.
The things that are the moat, that everybody says is their moat, is CUDA. The fact that they somehow have contracts on top of TSMC, as if people can't go to TSMC outside of them, which is definitely not true, right? Because Apple's doing it, Google's doing it, Microsoft and Amazon and others. I don't even know where Qualcomm goes, but maybe even Qualcomm's going to them. So it's not like, I think people are confusing Nvidia and TSMC as if they're the same company sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that, but here's what Jensen said. Like from a bull's perspective, this is actually a good point. He says there's like 35,000 parts in one H100, and only 6 of them are from TSMC.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I don't know what he's referring to. Like, it can't be cabling and cooling and the rack and all that kind of stuff. Is he referring to is he counting parts like every single screw and every single cable in a wire? It's very concerning and alarming that that's how many parts they have.
Yeah, he said this is like a car. Okay. I'm like, okay. Like tens of thousands of parts, that's like a car.
Yeah, I would want to know what those parts are.
Yeah, it would be interesting if, he says 6 from TSMC, but the rest is from like Home Depot screws, like obviously, like the question is, are you making those parts or are you just buying it from some other commoditized supplier?
I don't think they're making them.
So what does he mean by that?
I mean, I don't know how you get there, but just looking on their website, they have 6 rack screws. They have LED indicators, buttons, bezels. I don't know how you get to 30,000 with that though.
Wes in live chat says building out a data center is mainly the racks, and Nvidia doesn't make. Dell and HP make all the racks.
Oh yeah, was that 30,000 comment about the Grace Hopper and not it was or the H100?
I don't know for certain. Why does that matter?
Because the Grace Hopper is their data center of H100s.
Oh, I see. I see. Interesting. Joe is doing everything he can in live chat to throw me off.
Yeah, if he's talking about the Grace Hopper, then I would want to know in comparison, like how many parts are there in a server rack normally, right? Like it sounds impressive to say that many parts, but I'm not quite sure.
Have you seen him? I mean, like, when you think about Jensen, do you have an idea of, like, do you take him at his word?
I'm gonna go no comment for now.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, looking at the Grace Hopper, this is for West. It does look like they are building their own rack and cooling system and the cabling and the power cells and all that. So if that's what he's referring to, then each of the trays, all the screws on all the trays, the cabling, the cooling, yeah, I could see how they get to 30 to 40,000 parts. But this is not like a car. It's not complex parts.
I mean, it's still, you need specialized equipment to build all that, right?
You don't need specialized equipment to build screws and cables and trays.
The one thing that he said was, it wouldn't be possible. Like he said, there's a lot of AI to design the chips. They use a lot of AI to design chips. Like it wouldn't be possible to build what they did without using AI in the design stage.
That's been true since Intel Pentium 2. VHDL arguably is using some AI under the hood to optimize routing on chips.
So are those AI models proprietary to Nvidia?
So Nvidia certainly owns the patents around certain block designs. So they may have like a really efficient way to do certain things, and they would have patent on that. So those are very real enforceable patents. But it comes down to, like, let's say you have a block that's 50% less efficient at doing, say, multiplication, floating point multiplication. NVIDIA has something that's more efficient. You can come up with something that's 50% less efficient, but doesn't infringe on their patents. Now you just got to question, like, okay, 80% margins, 50% less efficient. I could buy so many more of these.
Does it scale that way though? Is like,
Yes.
two of competitors' chips, same efficiency, same, compute power as one H100, for example.
The reason why it does is because your pipeline is usually full. The enemy of these big data centers is not the power on each individual chip, but overall queuing time. So if you think of like Sora, there was like a thing saying in the Bloomberg article about how Sora, they're not talking about how long it takes for the image to be generated, but they said it's long enough for you to go grab a snack and come back. So it's on the order of minutes. So let's say it's even taking one rack, probably taking more than one rack, quite frankly. But if it's just taking one rack, then that one rack is occupied for that one customer for a certain number of minutes. So you look at your peak traffic and you have to have that many racks to serve all that traffic. So if it's not as efficient, maybe you take a little bit longer to serve each customer request, but you have more of those racks, then that means that the buffering time is gone. So if buffering was comprising of more than 50% of your time, yeah, your customers end up with a better experience and it scales up really well.
And would that be AMD chips?
AMD or custom.
Mm-hmm. What do you know about Microsoft's in-house chip?
Nothing.
They're very tight-lipped, right? Why do you think that is, though? Like, if they had a better chip than Nvidia, wouldn't they say our chip is
No.
better in these ways?
It's just like Tesla never wanted to piss off Panasonic while they were their supplier. Why would you want to piss off Nvidia while you're still buying their chips?
Well, but Tesla is now starting to talk about how 4680 compares to 2170s in terms of energy density, correct?
Yes, but they've already spooled up a lot of production and calmed down their competitors by showing them that they're still buying their chips.
By when do you think Microsoft will have its orders from Nvidia?
I don't know.
Who's producing Microsoft's chip?
Most likely TSMC.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, Machine was saying the other day that you have to see one earnings result that shows a slowdown in revenue growth or earnings growth to short the stock. But I don't think that's necessary. If Microsoft comes out and says, even just like, a couple sentences about how their chip compares better to Nvidia, isn't that the end of the hype cycle for Nvidia?
I don't know unless it becomes clear that they were the 20% customer.
I mean, they have to be. They gotta be. I mean, Microsoft or Amazon, the question is the same. Either one of those companies.
Well, we already know Facebook has come out and said it, right?
I mean, what's most surprising to me right now, I mean, this does look like a bubble. Nvidia look like a bubble to me. High margins, like unreasonably, clearly temporary imbalance between demand and supply, leading to high growth rate, high margins, and on top of that, you're doing high PE multiples as well. So all of those things are going to change at some
But you have
point.
to take the bull case.
No, I know. Not in here. On Patreon, I do. But look, how is Gene Munster so positive on the stock then?
I think everybody's projecting out that AI demand is not calming down anytime soon, but I don't think that I think people have bought into this idea that CUDA and custom chips are not, somehow people think it's going to take a lot longer for companies to get off of Nvidia. And so you hear Gene Munster even say things like, in the long term, this may not be as sustainable, but in the near term, it will be. And it's very strange I would say, from a value perspective.
I know.
Making that discussion. It's like,
that's literally everybody.
Yeah, shouldn't you discount your DCF by saying, like, this is a momentary thing, but we shouldn't project it out going forward? I don't know. It's like when people were trying to do that with the Tesla EV credits, yet those lasted a lot longer than I thought, and have still lasted. Like, Tesla still reports excluding ZEV credits. I'm very curious why Nvidia hasn't come out and said, we have these contracts that are long dated contracts. They're all like the company that's buying 20% of their chips today. Does the market expect that that's going to continue for more than 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? This one provider is just going to buy 20% of their chips? If so, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the lifespan of these chips? Do they expire after a couple of years? If not, that company's just going to be growing at this rate constantly? It's weird.
Well, I think the bull case is about other companies, smaller companies, continuing to buy. Even if Microsoft stops, buying this many chips from Nvidia, others will step in and more than make up for any decline in Microsoft's demand.
Yeah, that's a thesis I'm not sure will hold out to be true, because we've seen this already. There was a talk by the YC guys, I think it's called the Light Cone podcast. It's a new thing. And they were talking about how, and I have to run right after this, but they were talking about how companies are trying to find a niche in the AI space. And making generalized AI is not a niche because the cost per token from OpenAI and Google is dropping rapidly. As that drops, the need for custom ASICs goes away. So then the new thing that they're trying to do is say, well, you'll want your own custom stuff because you want to keep the data in-house. But that wasn't a real strong argument for cloud. So I don't understand why it would be for AI.
You'd see.
Matt, I got a quick question for you. Is Dojo not competitive with Nvidia is it like cost per compute, or is it many metrics that they're not competitive with Nvidia on, or?
It's most likely the fact that Dojo requires a custom compiler, and the compiler maybe is buggy. I don't know if they're using the XFA compiler. They probably should have, if they're not. But yeah, there's something there that's preventing them from using it. Cost per compute would be the way to look at it, but it would also be, cost per equivalent flops in compute. So it could also just be that there's not enough Dojo. So if you don't have enough Dojo in your data center, then why would you build something that uses just that amount of Dojo? Why wouldn't you just use the Nvidia? So it's kind of like a chicken and egg. If you don't have a lot of Dojo, you're not going to optimize for Dojo. So I think the announcement that Tesla authorized this big data center, which we believe to be Dojo, says that once it's built, they probably will optimize the hell out of it, and it'll probably be a good replacement. But I don't think you can, if Elon was saying something like, show me people are using it, then I'll approve the order, I don't think it would work, but I got to run.
Okay, see you next time. You'd see. Want to talk some macro?
Yeah, I just had a couple follow-up thoughts on that, because I was just kind of thinking about how just crazy high Nvidia's gross margins are, and so I would think an opportunity like Dojo would be an excellent way for another company, in this case Tesla, to compete with Nvidia if the margins are that good. But if Elon still frames it as like a long shot bet, I was trying to understand why it was more of a long shot bet. Like, it seemed like it's not necessarily financial, or it's not necessarily cost per compute for that project to not necessarily be competitive, because it's just crazy that Nvidia can have 70% gross margins and Tesla still come out and say, yeah, we're not sure if this is even going to work out. Dojo is still framed as a long-term bet.
Well, the long-term bet isn't that, there's not going to be demand for AI chips for training and inference, etc. It's more that, are you going to keep up with NVIDIA's products?
Do you think they would, do you think that, I guess I'm trying to understand how, when you say keep up with, would it matter if their chips are slower, but they cost half as much to purchase? Do you think that would be a big, how do you think they rank the importance of the different chips? Is it just purely the fastest, best chips out there, or how do you think cost plays into that factor?
This is not my expertise area, but Elon's making the same decision that every other person training models are making. Do I buy my own chip, or do I just rent from another company, right? Basically, it's the same. Do I do it in-house, or do I buy it from a supplier? And, it sounds like it comes down to pace of progress, pace of innovation. Is Tesla's in-house chip team going to progress faster than the Nvidia team?
Yeah, maybe next time Meta's back, I'll ask him some of these questions. It just seems kind of crazy that the Nvidia is really that far ahead.
Why is that crazy? That's all they focus on. Elon has his hands in 25 different things. How is that crazy? If you're sprinting against Usain Bolt, and you're also trying to, make a breakfast while you're running, how is it crazy that you can't beat Usain Bolt?
I shouldn't say necessarily beat him. I don't think they're necessarily going to come up with a better chip than Nvidia. But if Nvidia only had 20 or 30% gross margins, then I'd say, okay, yeah, that makes sense of why they continue to purchase from them. But Nvidia has insane gross margins, and I shouldn't say overcharging because the demand's there, but it doesn't seem like there's other companies even in the vicinity of them.
They're just like Usain Bolt. it's not that crazy.
Are you more or less optimistic, on your position on Nvidia over the last 6 months as you've seen them operate?
I don't have a position on Nvidia. What are you talking about?
No, just not like a stock position, but like a framework, the way you think of them as a company.
Well, Meta asked a good question to Omar the other day. What do you think their margins are going to be 5-10 years down the line? And Omar said, 30%, 25-30%.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, Omar and Meta know this industry way better than I do. But if you look at Nvidia's profit margin history, it goes up and comes down. They're very cyclical. Right now, they're at a cyclical high. They're also riding the AI wave. There's a lot of hype around the company's stock, leading to high multiple, on top of high margins, on top of high revenue growth. I mean, all of those are abnormal situation. Like, this is triple abnormal situation. Clearly a bubble, in my opinion. The only thing that kind of surprises me is Gene Munster's position on the Nvidia stock. He seems very bullish on the stock still. And Tom Lee too, by the way.
Would you say if Nvidia's margins are 30% long term, do you think that's a combination of more supply and less demand, or do you think it's clearly one more or the other, like clearly more less demand or a lot more supply, or a combination of both?
I think demand for training compute and inference compute will continue to grow at a high rate, but I think there's going to be more supply, both from Nvidia and others as well. Like, did you know that Microsoft comprises 20% of Nvidia's data center revenue?
Yeah, it's really highly concentrated. It's basically just like the large cloud players, the big tech companies are
and they're all coming out with their own chips.
So then, we can move on from this topic if you don't want to talk about it any longer, but that was my point, is Tesla has been working on their own chips longer than Microsoft has, correct?
Which, I mean, like, I understand, but at the same time, Tesla's dependence on Nvidia isn't as costly to Tesla as Microsoft's dependence on Nvidia. Like, Microsoft has a much larger incentive to replace Nvidia than Tesla does. And Tesla replaced Nvidia on the inference side.
So you're saying because Microsoft's more motivated, they'll be able to solve the problem quicker than what Tesla would? Is that kind of what you're
Amazon
saying?
too, yeah, of course, and Meta. All of those companies are a lot more incentivized to replace Nvidia than Tesla is on the training side.
Yeah, okay. Do you think on the inference side, is that problem just a lot easier to solve, or why were they able to do it? It seems like a lot quicker on the chip inside the car than the data center side.
I asked that question to Meta. I don't quite remember his answer, but if I can throw out an amateur guess, and I think it's that on the inference side, the chip can be more specialized than on the training side for a given company.
Okay.
So I think that allows the customer to more headway to kind of move ahead of Nvidia. I'm not explaining this correctly, but can you imagine if Nvidia was designing an inference chip for 20 automakers around the world, whereas Tesla is just designing for its own vehicles? And Tesla has, Wes would be great to answer this question, and Tesla has visibility into its own vehicles in the future, what it wants to do exactly with that chip. Whereas on the training side, I don't think there's that much customization as on the inference side. But that's just my amateur take.
Yeah, because I was thinking if the reason that Tesla was able to solve so much quicker on the car side, I would think that training data would be very specific. Like it's not maybe like it's to some extent it is very generalized, but on the other hand, you could make an argument that it's very much about the road and traffic and the way people interact around roads and the way cars travel and things like that. Like you don't need to know physics and things like that, other generalized types of information to know how to drive a car.
Yeah, and I think like I'm gonna throw out some numbers. Let's say on the training side, Tesla needs to buy a few $1 billion of Nvidia, a few $1 billion, like a couple $1 billion of Nvidia chips. And that's enough to do their training of FSD, right? But on the inference side, they have to put an FSD computer into tens of millions of vehicles, and each one costs $1,000, $2,000, right? So that's tens of billions of dollars. So a 10%, 20% savings on the inference side adds up to a lot more money, an order of magnitude more money than it does on the training side. Maybe that's part of the answer.
Yeah, I don't know. This is out of my area of expertise.
Yeah, it's kind of blind leading the blind right now. But so how about we focus on macro and we can open our eyes?
Also blind leading the blind, but yeah, what I saw today that the future Fed's funds rate's only expecting 3 rate cuts.
Dude, I sent Wes 10 invitations to come out to speak a word, and he comes as soon as I change the topic.
It's been really loud. Sorry, I was able to get into a quiet area.
Would you like to respond to Steven's questions?
Yeah. I maybe just like put very simply, I don't know if this will help you understand, is that inference chips are super, super simple. They deal with just a pre-trained model, which is very, very, very simple by comparison to an untrained or the process of training a model. So inference chip is like, it's very simplistic in its design. It has very few specialized memory blocks. It has only one real processing center. Training chips are extremely complex. They have many different areas and subsections, and they offer different levels of compute across those different subsections, and they have different types of memory, which can do many different types of things. And it's like the equivalent of a multi-story complex manufacturing facility versus like very simple, like a sprinkler system, which just takes in like water and outputs, like a spray in a certain direction. But like this very complex manufacturing facility can take in any type of raw input and process it into something that is extremely valuable and useful in a very tight formatted package. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, so I got a couple other questions then. So on the inference side, is Intel or AMD, since it seems like it's not a super complicated problem to solve, is Intel or AMD going to enter that space at all? Like I think isn't Intel, don't they own Mobileye?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a long conversation, but the very like tip of the iceberg is that they've been trying. They've been trying for a really long time, and they've just not been able to kind of crack that market. Like Nvidia has actually tried to get into the mobile and handheld gaming market, and they've failed miserably. So it's not like they're a perfect company. And, Intel tried as well. They tried to get into the discrete graphics market, and they've failed. They've tried 3 separate times. I was actually a part of 2 of those attempts, when I was working at Dell and a couple other companies. So, it's not for lack of trying. And, AMD has been trying as well, and they've got a new effort that Meta pointed out to me, which, good for them. It'll unfortunately take years to get there. Kind of the best example that I could give, if you know about TensorFlow and PyTorch, is that even though TensorFlow was like way productionized and really good, PyTorch took years to get to the point where TensorFlow was for production. They were great for research and doing training and developing new models in research, but not for production. It took years. In fact, I don't even think they're quite there yet in a production standpoint. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of a more closer analogy.
Yeah, so that definitely helps. So if we zoom out and look at like a 50,000 foot view, would you say the training chips that Nvidia builds now, the H100s and stuff, do you think that is a harder problem to solve, or like the dedicated GPU and some of the car automotive type solutions, like are those comparable? Like in my head, I'm thinking if they can't solve what seems to be the two problems being like dedicated GPUs or discrete GPUs and things like that on the consumer side, won't the data center generative AI chips be a lot harder not to crack?
I think your terminology was a little off there. I'm trying to get at the heart of your question. Like NVIDIA is really good at making both consumer grade hardware and feature sets and enabling those for companies to create actual solutions, as well as data center hardware and infrastructure and solutions there as well. So they're really good at doing both. They own the market. Like it's somewhere between 97 and 99% of the market. Like it's not even close. And as a person who worked in Google Cloud for years and who had to purchase this stuff, and like drive them on new SKU development and feature sets that we wanted, types of things, they own the industry. So maybe I'm not really getting at the heart of your question, but maybe that helps.
That maybe frames it better. So it's not necessarily saying like the enterprise versus the consumer side. It's not like one side is easier or more difficult.
No. Okay. Well, maybe I would say that differently. Enterprise is difficult. It tends to be difficult too, and just in different ways. Because every company has a different set of checkboxes that they need. They all have their own custom, infrastructure that you need to work with. And so I've worked with a lot of really big enterprise companies and try to get them stood up on, different types of AI stuff and, GPU accelerated stuff, HPC type stuff, things like that.
So is Microsoft making a push into this space then a little bit, or like how long? I guess clearly they have. How long have they been like doing this push? Because I'm a big Azure user. I do some consulting in the Azure space, and it's just kind of surprising that they don't have some type of their own solution by now, because it's not like Azure's like some new product or something like that. There's an insane amount of CapEx spend that they have on Azure every year.
Yeah, they've been pushing this for a long time. They tried with FPGAs, which are programmable in the field, which means they can do a lot of specialized tasks and then change on the fly. So nothing's burned into the silicon. They're not general, they're more specific. Anyway, I could go into detail there, but it's boring. But they've been trying for a long time. They tried with FPGAs and that didn't scale well because custom ASICs are just much more powerful for neural networks because of how neural networks are most efficiently programmed today, which is through matrix multiply and very basic matrix compute units that are burned into the hardware. So that's, the chip is super cheap once you figure out exactly how you want to make it. But this goes into a longer conversation of how to build all the tools on top of it. And Meta kind of hinted at that because you need a custom compiler, and custom compilers can take years to build. And it gets all into this weird, kind of black ops, middleware, low level computer development stuff that really only a handful of people in the world know about. So everybody just kind of throws up their hands and goes, how much time is it going to take? How many people do I need? How much? And it's like, well, you could put all of these people in a room and try to figure it out, and they may never come up with something. That's why that stuff is so hard. And that's why Nvidia, I'm trying to kind of like roll this back to the main point. It's why Nvidia has, this kind of unstoppable position. And they've had it for so long. And Jensen continues to build on top of that in a really compelling way. And he's never really, just to be clear, like, I don't feel, I've been working with them for over 2 decades. I don't feel like he's ever used that in a bad way. Like, he always gave us good prices, at various companies that I was at, the people that I worked with, obviously. But they're taking direction, from the company as a whole. And they tried to do their best to fend off crypto. Like, that was a huge problem for cloud companies as well, because there's a ton of fraud there. And he's done his best to amplify AI. And he really tried to get into the handheld gaming market, and we tried to help, but at the end of the day, that just didn't play out. He tried to get into mobile, sold some phones in India, like a lot of phones in India, but that never caught on. I can go on and on about this, but they have a very deep moat. And there's only really one company that succeeded in dealing with this moat, and that's Google with TPUs. And Amazon has tried. They've tried with their Inference chip, and now they have a training chip, and I can't remember that name, but Microsoft now has announced their inference and training chips, and so they're going to try as well. And at the end of the day, this kind of makes them more competitive. That's all it really does. And it might make them more competitive, and that they just get better prices from Nvidia. And we're only talking like, an extra like 5 or 6% discount on top of the usually large discount that they get as one of the big, 5 companies that buys from them.
Wes, let me ask you a question. So Amazon's training chip I think it's called Trainium. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, Trainium.
And
yeah,
then
right. Yep.
And then there's also Inferentia. That's the Inference
Yes.
chip, right? Okay.
Yep.
So Google succeeded in replacing Nvidia H100s. Google said they do 90% on TPUs, right?
That's a very large percentage, yeah.
Yeah. What's the probability that Microsoft and Amazon will similarly succeed eventually?
It's not 100%, and I would say it's definitely better than a coin flip. Very smart people, but like I said, it's just a handful of people who can do this stuff in the world. Jim Keller, he's a guy at Tens Torrent, and he's done it to an extent, building a Trip and a part of Dojo. And, he's still, I respect the shit out of him, but he's still largely unsuccessful, with his company, Tens Torrent. It just takes a long time. It takes a really long time. Like, he's been at this I think he's been VP there for 3 years, something like that. So it takes time, But the percentage is somewhere between 50 and I'd say like 60%, just over a coin flip.
I thought didn't Jim Keller start his own company for this?
Yeah, Tens Torrent. He's part of the founding.
But you said he's a VP there?
Yeah.
He's
the guy. He's the chief technology officer, I think. I should probably look that up.
Henry Abanto in the live chat says Jim Keller is the CEO there.
Oh, is he CEO? Oh, maybe he took over that role now. Good for him.
Yeah. So, okay, let me just get this straight real quick. So, the probability of success, and let's define success as Microsoft replacing Nvidia for its own use, for its own cloud services. You're saying that probability is between 50 to 60%. And you're saying the same for Amazon. And would you say the same for Dojo? So are all those 3 companies, Microsoft, Amazon, and Dojo, similarly likely?
No, I'd say, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
So would you say the same is true for all three companies, Microsoft, Amazon, and Tesla, eventually replacing for, let's say, 80-90% of the workload?
I think Tesla's different, and here's why. It's because they are very, very specific on the thing that they're trying to solve. Whereas these other companies are trying to solve more generic AI type things. They're trying to sell AI services and compute to other companies. So it's more of a Swiss Army knife. But Tesla's very specific on the problem they're trying to solve. They're trying to solve a portion of AGI that's very specific. And that requires a very specific chip to be the most efficient. And that's what they've been doing. But it's just a long road. It's a really long road to develop that. And I thought they'd be there by now. Because essentially, like, we did it at Google inside of like 4 years, roughly. And so, it takes time. And that's why I think Tesla's different. And I can talk to the specific
Were
nature.
you part of the team at Google that worked on TPUs?
Yep. I was a product manager.
The project manager.
Yeah, product manager, not project. There's a difference. But I was one of two for cloud, for Google Cloud. So I was the product manager who was developing all of the top end features for customers and trying to get them spun up and working efficiently on TPUs at large.
Well, why don't you just talk for like 10 hours and we'll listen?
The kind of the high level is that TPUs are great, and they do like search type things and really good large language model computation, really good. But that's it. Like, they don't really do anything else. And when we developed the transformer model, that was like, the best expression of efficiency on that chip in that time frame, right? The chip has changed since then. It's like they're on TPU 5E now, and that was TPU 2 back then. And now that's much larger chips, much more memory, more complexity, more interconnectivity. There's a 3D torus, I can go into detail. But at the end, it's just way, way, way more efficient for those tasks. And so this is what Tenstorrent is trying to do, and like 90 other companies. I don't know, and my number is outdated. I'd have to look up on GitHub and see how many companies still exist. But it's like I went to a conference in 2017 for Cerebrus, and they still really don't have a product. And it's just it's a really difficult problem to solve. You might look at it and go, oh, I've been using computer chips for such a long time. It's not that hard. Intel did it. Why can't these other companies? And that's how non-software people kind of look at the problem. But software people, or people that like know how to develop these things, just go, holy crap, you need very specialized people for years, and you may never come up with something. One thing that people don't realize is that their phones do this natively. Qualcomm has licensed an AI set of registers in their chip where they can do native AI compute. And it's not training, it's inference, right? Like I was talking earlier, the simplistic part of it. But they have that on their chip. And they've been working on that, since I was at Taser, back in 2016. And, that's something that they continue to try to build out. And Google has that as well. Like the phone that I'm using right now has a little TPU in it. But it's the simplified, edge TPU, the one that just does inference. So it can run all of this Google Assistant type stuff natively and do cool things like Lens and, do it with very efficient power usage so that you're not like draining the crap out of your battery. So anyway, does that help?
It does, thank you. Tesla Yoda?
Yeah, thanks. Wes, it's great to have you on here, and obviously there's a ton of questions. One question I have is, do you know who was the main manufacturing partner for Google on the TPUs?
I don't think they've said that publicly, but what you can do is you can look to Taiwan and just see who the biggest exporter of chips are, and that's like easily solved. It's basically Samsung and TSMC, and those companies kind of obviously they're not commodities, right? Because these are the most complex things on the planet by far, and you can say like they basically power the entire world with silicon, and that's where everything comes from.
Yeah, and that leads to my follow-up question, which is during the development process, because you know the industry sort of looks at this as design and then manufacturing. So sort of during the design process, how much support would a Google and then sort of obviously the Amazons and the Microsofts, how much support do they get from the manufacturing company? For instance, TSMC, if they were the manufacturing partner, are they just order takers, or do they actually actively help Google in the design process?
Gotcha. So my quick and dirty analogy is think of it like a architect talking to a construction company. And the architect is like, hey, I want to design this really cool thing. And the construction company, or, you know, the engineer that's in charge of like the structural stability of the building goes, no, you can't do a giant 400-foot arch in the lobby. Like the building will fall down. Like it doesn't work. And TSMC, being the construction company, goes, you know what? We'll put that on our roadmap. We'll figure out a way to make that giant 400-foot arch in the machine that we're going to build in 2 years. And we'll put that into our roadmap. And that's the kind of working relationship that these companies have with chip makers, is that the TSMC doesn't even really make, unless they've changed their business model, they don't even make the machines that make the chips. Those are made by other companies. And those names are escaping me right now, but they're probably changed since I had to deal with this. At the end of I always say that, and I know the machine doesn't like that. What it boils down to is that Nvidia does a really good job of architecting new solutions and getting things on the roadmap and keeping that cycle really fluid and fast and efficient over the past 20 years. And so they can keep instructing these companies, because they don't want to own the actual foundries. They don't want to own that. They want to, at least that's their business model. I'll go too deep in the weeds here, but they do a really good job at the architecting part, and they don't want to be in the manufacturing part.
Right. So there's kind of the innovation, the architecture analogy is great. So there's a lot of innovation at the Nvidia end, but a lot of the IP of the how-tos, the know-how of making it, bringing it to life, bringing that building to life, resides with the TSMCs of the world. Well, there are two of them, but okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yep. That's basically how it works.
Wes, I don't think I got a deterministic yes or no. So are you saying Microsoft, Amazon, and Tesla are about as likely as to? Sorry, you said Dojo is more likely to replace Nvidia, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And what percent is that, you think?
100%. They would take 100% of their AI compute away.
No.
I think this is
The question is, what's the probability that Tesla will be able to replace NVIDIA chips for its training purposes with Dojo? Let's say 3 years.
Well, time is the determining factor there, because if Elon keeps on it, he will do it eventually.
So 3 to 5 years. What probability?
Oh, I'd give it like an 80-90% chance then.
Right.
Yep.
80-90%. And Microsoft, Amazon?
More like coin flip,
Interesting.
50-60%.
Wow, I thought those companies would be more likely than Tesla.
Tesla's just more driven to solve this problem because like Microsoft doesn't actually need it. At least they don't think they do yet. They're putting money behind it and a lot of resources, but they're not betting the company on it. This is why Satya had to come in and take over CEO, because he realized he had to bet the company on cloud. And that's why he's done so well. And like Bezos knew this, like he had to bet his company on cloud. And
Well, Tesla is paying Nvidia maybe $1 billion, $2 billion a year, right? Whereas Microsoft is paying more than $10 billion a year right now to buy those chips, right?
It's a very low. I don't know the exact sums, but I know they're spending a lot.
Yeah, Microsoft one customer comprises about 20% of Nvidia's data center revenue, and I'm guessing it's Microsoft. And
sure.
Nvidia makes about $61 billion per year, and it's growing really fast. And 20%, and I think data center revenues are most of it. So 20% of that is like $10 billion. So Microsoft could be paying Nvidia an order of magnitude more. Doesn't that mean Microsoft should be more motivated than Tesla?
I don't think so. Maybe I'll just tell you a short story. So like you've probably heard Jeff Dean talk about how he did this napkin math and figured out that if they did general, Google Assistant type compute on people's phones, that like they'd bankrupt the company because it was so inefficient if they did that on general compute. So that's why they developed TPUs. And essentially they did this thing called a code red, where they pulled all the best minds out of the company and started working on this. And like they basically said, look, it's an extinction level event for our company if we don't lead in this. And that's why Sergey and Larry turned the ship and like built this thing. Satya is not doing that. He's simply pursuing enterprise. And he's making tools and infrastructure for AI enterprise feature sets, which is not betting the company. But Elon is, like, he's said it many times, like, he's like, AI is going to dwarf the automotive part of the business. So he's betting the company on it. So he's way more.
He's not betting the company on Dojo.
No, but he's betting the company on AI, and Dojo is the best way to get there. So yes, I know what he's said publicly about, if it works, great, or it might not work or whatever. That's like not what I think is happening.
Okay.
I think they're full steam ahead on Dojo.
Gotcha. You'd see?
I think you answered my question. I was going to say, if you think it's a pretty high likelihood that it gets solved, let's say even if we extend the time frame more to 5 to 7 years, because you said the time frame is kind of what changes the odds pretty significantly. If we're thinking 5 to 7 years, you give Dojo a pretty high likelihood of being able to replace Nvidia. Why does Elon characterize Dojo as like this long moonshot project that maybe will work or maybe won't?
I think a better way to, I know he said that, but I think a better way to characterize it would be, it's going to work. It just might not be as efficient as whatever the Nvidia solution they have at that time will be, because Jensen's a great competitor. So it will be something that they have a data center, like, let's try to put brass tacks around this. They're going to have a Dojo data center, and that data center is going to have some level of compute that devs can run on it. Now it's going to be maybe more difficult or time consuming, but once you have your model constructed and you have all of the ingress and egress, infrastructure built out, and you can feed data into it and you get a trained model out, the cost of that is going to drop drastically over time, like as that gets amortized. And the level of efficiency that you'll have with that, once they've solved, like kind of generally solved parts of FSD and they have their architecture set, that they will be able to efficiently run that data center at like a fraction of the cost of whatever the newest, latest, greatest Nvidia data center that they have to build out would be. Because they're not just training one model. You know, granted, they have a foundational model. I get that. But you can do pieces of this. It's not like you have to do it all at once, always. So they can still utilize that for a specific set of resources, or, you know, Dojo becomes the end-all be-all and everything is run on that. And that's where I think they should try to be. The problem with that is that they've never solved FSD before, so you have to build out, infinite amount of compute to solve a problem that's unsolvable. And they don't know where infinite ends. And the only company that can make that right now is Nvidia. They have infinite resources, essentially. You know, as Tesla sees it from their perspective, it's infinite. They just have to keep throwing the money and more chips roll in. Whereas Dojo, on the other hand, they might have to keep revising the chip to get it to the point where it can scale to infinite. And that requires work and resources and more specific demands over time. But once they get to that point, this is why I think it's a matter of time, then it becomes much, much cheaper over time to do that, and faster as well.
Tesla Yoda and Mike.
Yeah, I agree with Wes there on a little bit of sandbagging on Elon's end. Not dissimilar to the 4680 development and ramp. They have to keep the LGs, the battery suppliers, Panasonic, keep them appeased on the side while they're ramping up, because they can't afford for these partnerships to suddenly see them as competitors. And you hear this on earnings calls where they continue to thank and underscore that that 4680 is to supplement what they're buying from the existing suppliers. So I think similar to Nvidia, they will continue to need the H100s to bridge the time and the gaps before the Dojo FSD chips ramp up. One question, Wes, is from a architecture, from a chip designer kind of perspective, of course coming from Google, do you think strategically this is the right move for Tesla, and why that is from a chip architecture performance perspective? Why do they have to go after this opportunity?
Yeah,
Before that, Tesla Yoda, your sound quality mic quality is a little low. Is there anything you can do about that?
Thanks, noted.
Yep. Wes?
I think it's like three reasons. One, it keeps Nvidia honest, even though they're still honest about it. It keeps them very honest in their pricing and their kind of prioritizing Tesla above maybe other companies to get the newest, latest, greatest first, like to fulfill their roadmap, kind of their order list. And then two, it gives them something to shoot for. Gives them kind of this, pie in the sky, like all things being equal, what would be the most efficient type of compute that you could think of to solve this in the fastest way possible? So it keeps that door kind of wide open. It keeps innovation moving at its fastest pace. Like you can always keep a set of people working on this while these other folks are still working with Nvidia, and they're like, oh, we just developed this great feature on Dojo, and this is how fast it can go. Well, it's like, well, we just got a new version of CUDA in the development toolkit, and their library actually does it faster. This is kind of the rub with AI and hardware. And kind of the third, I think, major thing is that they can not only use this for AI with vehicles, but they can also use it with Optimus. They can also potentially use it with other sister companies. And potentially that would scale much faster, because if you have essentially all of the infrastructure kind of like, from the ground up, and all of the people that know that, and you own that source code, you can make changes to it really fast, and you can iterate really fast. And so that kind of allows you this flexibility of saying, hey, like, we've got this problem over here, maybe at a sister company, and now we need, this type of AI compute, and we need it really fast, and this is our scenario, and this is the output we need, so it enables that as well. So kind of those three things.
Mike.
Thank you, Yaman, and as always, Wes, incredible insights. I have a question about Tesla's advantage with real-world driving data. With what we've seen from OpenAI's text-to-video generative advances and computer vision advances, regarding simulation data, so not real-world driving data, simulated data, a lot of which is and Waymo depends on, and others, Cruise and others. Is that advantage still the advantage historically with these advances in computer vision and generative AI as it relates to video?
That's a good question. I think it's becoming less dependent over time, because now you can take data from the cameras and essentially turn it into ground truth. That's a patent that Ashok had from years ago. And if you can do that efficiently in a better, quicker, more realistic sense than you can with simulation, then simulation just starts to become less and less interesting. So in the past, when we had issues with FSD, we could essentially take that and take all the camera feeds and simulate it as best as we could with our simulation engine, and try to work out the kinks and why it didn't work right. But now you don't really need to do that. You take the actual camera feeds that they have, you turn that into ground truth, which is way better than simulation, because now you have a more exact vector space of exactly what was happening. And now you can run that through your quote unquote simulation without actual simulation. So it's more like the vehicle is actually experiencing that, firsthand rather than third hand or minute differences. And then inside of that, you can start to change some of these aspects and, simulate small nuances that are different. But I find that simulation would have less and less of an effect on that. I would find it less interesting, because if I have all of these sets of ground truth, from actual data, then I don't really need simulation anymore. I start to look at these interesting bits that I'm getting from the field and just using those in my training data and seeing how that improves the overall experience. And I think that's the path that they're on. So I don't know if the heart of your question is because Nvidia is providing the simulation hardware, because they do. So I would think that would have less interesting to have, simulation hardware over time from Nvidia.
Do you think that the gap between Tesla and the other AV players such as Waymo, do you think that gap has narrowed with this significant advance in computer vision and generative AI?
That's not what matters though, Mike. The answer to that question is clearly yes. But Elon has said many years ago on an earnings call that in 2030 it's going to be as easy as creating GPS service to build FSD. And Tesla's long-term, sustainable, durable advantage is going to be manufacturing. Waymo doesn't manufacture its cars. They buy cars from others. They have to pay profit margins to others. And others don't have low cost to start with as Tesla does. So I want to go back to Nvidia discussion. Where were we? You'd see.
So Wes, you were saying that Tesla, the problem Tesla's trying to solve is a little bit different than like Microsoft or Amazon or things like that. Let's say Microsoft solves their problem and their reliance on Nvidia shrinks. Would Amazon be able to pick up on that pretty easily, or like if once another I'm basically trying to ask, once one company solves it, will other companies be able to solve it easily then as well, or?
I think the only thing that's going to prove is that it's solvable. I think it'll just embolden them to just pursue it even harder.
Well, doesn't Google doing it already meet that?
Well, they haven't solved it with a scalable hardware solution. Their vehicle costs too much. They can't scale that solution. Not only that, but we have no idea behind the scenes how much cost goes into maintaining the infrastructure. Like, they're more than likely having to continually update their HD maps, for instance.
No, sorry, I thought we were. I thought Yutz's question was about Nvidia and TPUs. Yutzi?
Yeah, it's more on like the TPU side of things, or Microsoft solving it for their own data centers.
Right.
Azure.
So you're trying to get at what's the likelihood of them solving it with their hardware? Is that what you mean?
No, basically what Yutzi is asking is if Microsoft efforts around replacing NVIDIA, reliance on NVIDIA succeeds, does that embolden others? But the question is invalid because Google already did that. Google already achieved it with TPUs.
Well, for their specific needs, yes. Right? Their specific needs was kind of search and ranking.
Yeah, so I guess the question, another way to ask Yutzi's question is the fact that Google replaced reliance on NVIDIA with TPUs for their own needs, does that give you more confidence that Microsoft and Amazon will be able to do the same?
Not necessarily, because like I said before, like Google kind of got the company on it, just to give you a simple answer.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, don't you think Microsoft and Amazon will have to do the same at some point? Especially because NVIDIA has ambitions around creating its own cloud service?
Yeah, I wrote this kind of, I don't know what to call it, summary of like my prediction of the future. And I came up with this term called AI native. And if your company wasn't AI native, by the end of the decade, you're not going to survive. And we know now that digital native companies are really the only highly profitable companies. And AI native is going to be necessary when some portion of AGI is solved. There's just going to be no other software that's going to be necessary. All the software will write itself. And you won't be able to make money unless you have the ability to do that natively inside of your company and innovate quickly. You'll just be left behind.
How far out do you think that milestone is?
Well, there's kind of three schools of thought on that. One is Demis. He's the CEO of DeepMind at Google. He thinks 2030. And then there's Ray Kurzweil. He's also at Google. He also has a similar prediction for the end of the decade, but he predicted that, I think like 2 decades ago. And then there's this third way to look at it, and that I would say a large part of what we've done already, we're well on our way. Like, the writing's kind of on the wall at this point. It's just a matter of time, and I don't think it's going to be, honestly, that long with the way things are going. And I'm not talking about, like, omnipotence or the singularity, but enough AI will exist to where we're just not going to need traditional coding anymore. And if your company is still writing traditional code and like not using AI to generate that code, you're not going to be competitive. And I think that's going to happen much, much sooner. I mean, largely the developers that I know, unless you're restricted from using AI to write code for you, that's what they're doing now. Like if you're not doing that at this point, if you don't have access to your own trained model where you can import your source into and then have AI help you generate code from that, then you're not going to be competitive.
Which one of the big tech companies is more likely to be less relevant 5 years from today? So among Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Nvidia, and Tesla, let's say. Or
the one that I continually look at is Meta. I still don't understand how Meta is honestly relevant, but after I took my trip, I so many people still use Facebook. It's pretty funny. So yeah, I don't see Meta being relevant in 5 years, but Microsoft has, to explain it very simply, like Microsoft owns enterprise, AWS owns the cloud, and Google owns the internet. So like those companies aren't going anywhere fast, or they're not going to go away fast. They're going to be around for a decade or two, even if they don't, go full native AI. They don't become an AI native company.
how much of a threat Azure is taken away from AWS, right? And now Nvidia is also trying to enter that cloud space, correct?
Yeah, you can look at the Gartner stuff and see that it's not a huge market share that they have. Like AWS still dominates. They own enterprise though. Like they have a lot of enterprise customers, but it's just not the lion's share of cloud. If I don't know if we want to talk about that, but yeah, they still need to figure out how to become AI native, and they are. Like I think they have a way head start on Amazon. Like Amazon's kind of laughable in their AI development at this point because it's just like stopped.
What do you think will happen to Trainium and Ethereum?
Those are products for smaller type AI compute needs. So those products will just be cloud services, and they'll be like for training, like little type chatbots, it's hard to say little LLMs, but they are. They're very simplistic LLMs that are trained to do very specific tasks and have a very specific focus. So yeah, that might be a fairly good chunk of their revenue. I don't know how much profit will bring them, but it just kind of fills out their portfolio. And all the cloud companies have those types of things. But I'm trying to get more at the heart of your question. Those companies aren't going anywhere. Like they're still going to be around.
So basically, if I'm a small enterprise and I can't pay, H100 prices, then I go to Trainium.
Yes, totally.
But if H100, but let's say H200 comes out and H100 prices drop substantially, then I still prefer to train on H100 rather than Trainium. Is that right?
Probably not, because whatever you're training now, you're going to be training in 3 to 5 years, and you're going to want, more of the latest, greatest hardware at the time. And then, yeah, I feel like I'm selling cloud services to you. You're going to want all the newest, latest, and greatest tools and infrastructure, and you're going to want your business is also going to be spiky. So you're not, that hardware is just going to be sitting around. At some point, you're not going to want to manage the data center. You don't want to be in that business. So this is how I sell cloud services to people.
No, I understand, but as Nvidia innovates and newer products come out, the current H100 prices will drop substantially. And isn't that going to pressure margins on Trainium?
Well, yes and no. They're going to have to continue to develop Trainium over time, right? They can't just have one chip and it just sits there.
I
It'll
see.
get
Okay,
stale.
gotcha. Interesting. So Amazon is targeting a totally different market than Nvidia's chips.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, they're not competing with Nvidia, but TPUs do. That's why you see them competing in the MLPerf AI race. So they do compete head to head.
Which one do you think would win, Google's TPU or Amazon's Trainium 5 years down the line?
Oh, TPUs by far. But the latest MLPerf, Nvidia won, I think, 3 of 4 categories, including the open category, which is huge.
How likely do you think Amazon's AWS is to lose number one place, market share,
Oh, not likely at all.
in the next
The
5
only
years?
way the only way that would happen in the next 5 years is if a very large portion of AGI is solved. And the likelihood of that, I think, is, maybe 30 to 50%. It's definitely not a coin flip that AGI is going to be solved in the next 6 years. But it's more than likely a portion of it will be solved. And that portion could definitely take market share away from traditional cloud services, because those won't run on anything but a custom AI chip. It's way more efficient. So like the Jeff Dean napkin math, traditional compute running an AI training is like billions of times more efficient. And then when you do inference, it's hundreds of thousands of times more efficient. So you can serve 10,000 inference requests for a penny, for instance, if I was going to put numbers on it for you. And then with traditional compute, it might cost you $20 or something.
Okay.
It's way more expensive.
I have a pop quiz for you. You ready for a pop quiz? You don't mind a pop quiz?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I love it.
All right. Top 3 market share: Amazon, Azure, Cloud, Google Cloud. What are the percentages?
Oh, the percentages. Let's see. From my memory, Amazon used to have 80%, and Azure was like 12%. Cloud was like 6%, something like that. And Oracle and all the others comprised like 3 or 4%. That's what it used to be. I don't know what it is now.
That sounds like a decade ago, though, when you were at Google.
Yeah, those numbers are like 2019, 2020 numbers.
So as of beginning of this year, according to, I don't know of these websites, okay, so take it with a grain of salt. But I checked a few sources just now, and they're about the same. AWS, 32%. Azure, 23%. Google Cloud, 10%. I don't think AWS is as far ahead of Microsoft as you think it is, or it was the case in the past.
Yeah, feel free to post that link. I'll check it out.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. You'd see.
I understand the Azure space pretty well, and Microsoft's able to inflate their Azure numbers versus AWS because most of the time they're comparing revenue, and Microsoft classifies a lot of Azure revenue as like software licenses. That's not really Azure type revenue. So I believe their Office 365 enterprise subscriptions to like install the Office apps on a computer for a company gets classified as like commercial revenue. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And so it's not necessarily a one-to-one compared to like compute and stuff, if that's what you're thinking about with AWS.
Wes, I DM'd it to you. You'd see. In the meantime, do you think Microsoft, AWS will lose its lead in the next 5 years? How likely that AWS loses its lead in the next 5 years?
I don't think they're going to lose their lead, but I see I think AWS and Azure are going to continue to dominate a large percentage of the cloud services. I think Google, like I think long term it's going to be like 45% AWS, like maybe 35% Azure, and then like 10% Google and others.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so okay, then what do you make of what Wes said earlier, that TPUs will win the race versus Trainium?
I don't really understand that stuff come in the cloud segment. So yeah, I guess I don't really know. Like there's going to be other things to the cloud besides just like AI models and stuff like that. So
But AI models are going to be an increasing percentage of cloud services, right?
yeah, but I guess my question would be, what I don't even know what that market would look like long term, of what the breakdown of like CPU versus AI models would be like in public clouds. I guess, does Wes have a comment on that? Like what the percentage he thinks? Because I could be way off on this.
I think my understanding, I mean, I think Wes is reviewing that link I just sent him, but I think my understanding is that ASICs and GPUs will increasingly replace CPUs at cloud services. But Wes,
Yeah, I was reading through that and I was trying to look up the source data. Can you ask a question real quick again? Because I think it's how quickly will custom ASICs replace other forms of compute?
so let's say 5 years, 10 years down the line, what percent of cloud services are being offered on GPUs and custom ASICs versus CPUs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because just the general purpose of like spinning up a VM, that's still going to be general purpose CPU, but the actual like jobs that are run, the VMs would house, some amount of GPU compute. So that I think will go up. Like when I left Google, they were only doing like 10% of all VMs had a GPU attached. And, it was way less than that had a TPU attached. And I see that, going way up, like every job that you would want to do compute on, any type of data service or any type of request would be handled by a trained model versus like, some amount of generalized GPU compute. So you wouldn't see a CPU heavy VM or memory heavy VM. You would just see a GPU heavy VM that would be able to handle like, 1 million requests a second or something like that. I see that percentage going way up. I could see it being well over 60, 70% in that time frame.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's maybe where I just disagree a little bit. I still see the demand for just general CPU as staying high for a long time, and that the generalized AI compute maybe goes to 20 or 30% long term, but I just sense that there's just a massive market for things that you don't really need specialized chips for. But I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, there'll always be a need for generalized compute to actually run the VMs and potentially run the infrastructure. And that's, like if I just look at that, like what amount of CPU would I need to do that? It's, like somewhere between 1% and 5%. Because when you spin up these VMs, the thing that you do inside of them is you use compute to run tasks. And I just don't see the need for that in the future outside of whatever your trained model is. Because what they'll do is they'll say, okay, I used to spin up this VM and I had this general CPU compute, but I took my source code and I ran it through an AI model and I asked the AI model how to make this more efficient. And I came up with a trained model on this specific source data for this specific VM. And this runs at like, 10,000% more efficient on GPU. So why would I not just feed the data into a trained model rather than generalized compute? So that's what I see happening over time. Obviously, I'm greatly oversimplifying it, But that's kind of the direction that we've gone in.
You'd see?
So if we look at part of the reason that Azure and AWS have kind of exploded is because you had all these enterprises that used to run their primary business line app, used to run obviously in servers and stuff, either in a local data center or even at the business's site. They've moved all those workloads up to the cloud. So what, like if you got to like a practical example, take like your take an HVAC company, for example, that has maybe a couple hundred employees. They have service techs and things like that. Their billing software, all that stuff's tied into their kind of primary business line app. That they maybe have 200 or 300 people in the company working on, and that workload in 2005 was running in a server cluster in either a data center or in their offices, and that workload got shifted to Azure, and so now Azure can charge the customer $50,000-$60,000 a month or whatever it costs for that compute. Do you see those apps, like in this case, like the apps for this HVAC company, do you see that being like rewritten to utilize AI in some certain way, or why would that not be CPU long term?
Right. So in that specific example, you could feed in your existing plans for whatever your product is now. And you could feed in like, hey, like this specific supplier, we want to reduce the amount of materials used by this machine, by 1%, output new plans to do that. And you feed that into the model and it outputs new plans. And people review those and provide tweaks to that. And you keep feeding it, tweaks, essentially to, I'm oversimplifying this, but you reprompt it until you get out your new design. And that all happens inside of a model rather than you looking at this design, and you're looking at it in your, like a 3D space, and, you're spinning it around and you're constantly using this VM, and compute is generating this view for you, and you're computing new models. I'm overusing the word model. Your own like 3D model, in your own calculations, in your own data that you're reviewing, instead of the model reviewing it for you, is kind of the thing that I'm trying to like point you at, is that in the past, that's what we've done. We look at the data. We try to understand patterns in the data. We try to figure out where new innovation will come from. But now the model, we're able to point the model at the data and just ask the model, where it can find things. And then we continue to iterate on that, whereas we're not looking at the data specifically. So we're not asking the generalized compute unit to do that. We're asking the trained AI model to do that. And it runs inside of inference rather than runs inside of general compute. I'm probably not explaining this well.
That's okay. This was incredibly helpful. Okay, we've been going on for more than 2 hours. Let's take a break. Let's continue tomorrow. Wes, this is an invaluable discussion, and 90% of it wouldn't have happened without you today.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be back tomorrow. Take care. Good night. Oh, by the way, episode 23 just got published. Please go to my YouTube page and like it, subscribe to it, share it with others, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.